James Maury Henson. Just hearing that name conjures up a world made of felt, foam, and just uh, pure boundless imagination.
He really does.
And to call him simply a puppeteer feels far too small. He was a visionary, a director, a creative producer, and genuinely one of the foremost architects of modern visual storytelling and fantasy.
That is the essential truth of his work. I mean, when we track his career spanning from the mid-1950s until his untimely death in 1990, it is astonishing how many foundational elements of contemporary entertainment.
So many.
From educational television to Hollywood blockbusters, they trace their roots directly back to him, his team, and, his innovations.
Absolutely. So for this detailed exploration, we're setting out on a mission to understand Henson's complete trajectory. We want to track him from, well, a curious college student who happened to be experimenting with a new medium called television, all the way to becoming the globally recognized creator of the Muppets.
Yep.
Our focus will be dual. Understanding the profound technical innovations he brought to puppetry, and, perhaps most movingly, reviewing the precise tragic details surrounding his sudden and completely unexpected passing.
And we'll analyze how he radically moved beyond traditional puppetry. I mean, literally revolutionizing how puppets could appear on screen and command emotional range.
And how he navigated what seemed like two entirely conflicting worlds.
Exactly. Hyper-effective television advertising on one hand and groundbreaking children's programming like Sesame Street on the other. And we also can't overlook his later, darker, and deeply personal passion projects, specifically the fantasy films The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth.
Right, where he truly pushed the limits of his artistry and his company's technical capabilities.
He really did.
Let's unpack this monumental journey. We begin with the foundation. Jim Henson, born James Maury Henson, arrived in Greenville, Mississippi on September 24, 1936. His early childhood was spent in Leland, Mississippi, before his family relocated to University Park, Maryland, near Washington, D.C. And the sources make it clear that the most defining moment of his formative adolescence was linked to a piece of technology that was just fundamentally reshaping American domestic life.
And that moment was the arrival of the family's first television set. It completely captivated him.
You have to remember the context of that period.
Oh, absolutely. Television was not yet fully defined. It was a wild west of new programming concepts. Henson was a teenager entering his creative period just as this medium appeared, giving him, a blank slate to experiment on.
And his early influences show that he was already looking beyond pure visual art. He was heavily influenced by radio personalities like the ventriloquist Edgar Bergen.
Right, who proved that voices and characters could create these vivid mental pictures.
An artist Henson would later dedicate one of his most important films to. He also closely studied the work of early television puppeteers like Bert Tillstrom, creator of Kukla, Fran and Ollie, and the pioneering work of Bill and Cora Baird.
And this exposure informs his entire approach. Interestingly, though, if you look at his formal education, it doesn't immediately suggest a career in mass media.
No, it doesn't.
He enrolled at the University of Maryland, College Park, originally intending to major in studio arts, thinking he might pursue a career as a commercial artist. He graduated in 1960, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in Calc, and this remains a surprising detail for many home economics.
That degree is definitely an unexpected piece of trivia for a future global entertainment mogul.
It really is.
But the path he was already forging in television was far more consequential than his academic pursuits. He started working at WTOP-TV at the young age of 17 in 1954. He was hired primarily to manipulate marionettes for a local Saturday morning program.
And while that initial job was extremely brief, I think it only lasted 3 weeks, it served as a crucial entry point. His demonstrable talent was quickly recognized, and he secured a referral to WRC-TV, which was the local NBC affiliate in Washington, D.C.
Then that move to WRC-TV is where the true genesis of the Muppets began, leading to the creation of Sam and Friends.
Right.
This was a highly experimental show. It ran from 1955 to 1961 as a short, quirky 3 to 5 minute nightly segment. This was effectively the laboratory where the fundamental prototypes of the characters and the technical styles that would define his career were born.
And crucially, this is the period where the early prototypes of Kermit the Frog emerged.
Very beginning.
The very beginning. And equally important on the business and creative front, Henson met Jane Niebel in a college puppetry class. She was a foundational collaborator in those nascent years. They co-founded Muppets, Inc. in November 1958, signaling their serious intent to turn puppetry into a business, and they married in 1959.
And while Jane later stepped back from performing, to focus on raising their 5 children. Her role in establishing the company was absolutely vital.
So vital.
Let's spend some time analyzing what the sources identify as the core technical revolution Henson enacted during this early period, because this is what fundamentally differentiated his work from everyone else's. Prior to Henson, television puppetry, much like stage puppetry, often meant filming a static puppet show from behind a miniature stage, a proscenium.
All right, that little box frame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Henson completely discarded that antiquated model.
His innovation was truly a leap forward, specifically for the medium of television. He completely embraced the camera lens, recognizing its unique power. He didn't film a puppet show. He created characters designed for the camera.
He used the camera dynamically.
Right, to engage with the characters, employing close-ups that were impossible on stage. He realized that television could give puppets life and sensitivity in a way that stage puppetry, with its necessary distance, just could not.
And this dynamic camera work was only possible because of his material science innovations. The traditional puppet theater, especially European styles, relied heavily on carved wood.
And wood is rigid, it's heavy, and it reflects light harshly.
So Henson shifted entirely to softer, flexible materials like foam, rubber, fleece, and various fabrics.
And this material shift allowed for several crucial things. First, the foam was lightweight, which enabled the puppeteer to use their hand inside the puppet as a mechanism.
Which gives you so much more control.
A level of fine motor control previously unheard of. And second, it allowed the puppeteer to achieve a significantly wider range of expression, since the mouth could be moved much more fluidly and accurately synchronized with dialogue or music.
And he also noted something about the light, didn't he?
He did. He said these softer materials absorb light much better, avoiding the distracting glare that traditional hard puppets often produced under stage lights, which made them look much more real on those old black and white television screens.
It also changed the physical relationship between the performer and the camera. Because his puppets were manipulated from below the set, with the performers often lying down or working from below, the character could be framed in a close-up that just filled the screen.
So the viewer, therefore, never saw the limitation of the stage.
The puppet simply was the character, talking directly to the audience.
Henson himself was very clear that many traditional puppeteers built very stiff puppets. If the puppet can barely move, you get very little expression, and the performance is flat. He wanted puppets that could reflect the flexibility and nuance of the human hand manipulating them.
That's it.
That combination of dynamic camera work and flexible foam is the defining aesthetic foundation of the Muppets.
And the most iconic example of this humble, flexible start is Kermit's origin story. I mean, the very first Kermit prototype illustrates just how resourceful Henson was.
Oh, it really does. He was constructed from incredibly simple, accessible materials.
Like what?
A halved table tennis ball for the eyes.
Seriously.
Fabric cut from his mother's old coat, and denim from a pair of jeans that formed the sleeve for the puppeteer's arm.
You're talking about a character that would later sing an Oscar-nominated song, starting life as recycled household objects.
It speaks volumes about the early, low-budget, highly creative ethos. And just to address the nomenclature, the name Muppet. Henson confirmed it was a portmanteau, a combination of the words marionette and puppet.
Which is a little bit ironic, isn't it?
It's slightly ironic because many of his key creations were hand puppets or rod puppets, not marionettes controlled by overhead strings.
But the name stuck, and it served its purpose, encapsulating his belief that he was innovating beyond the traditional forms and techniques available at the time. This innovation would soon be deployed to sell products, and surprisingly, sell them through aggression.
After Sam and Friends concluded in 1961, the majority of Jim Henson's creative energy throughout the 1960s was spent in the world of television commercials.
Right, that's where the money was.
He realized that this was where the consistent funding was and where he could continually hone his unique style for a mass audience. He moved his base of operations to New York City in 1963.
And while he focused on the business, his partner Jane shifted her focus to their rapidly growing family. But this commercial period was crucial for building the core artistic team that would execute his vision for decades. 2 additions during this era were just absolutely instrumental in shaping the humor and identity of the Muppets.
Those were writer Jerry Jewell, whom he hired in 1961, and performer Frank Oz, hired in 1963. Oz, in particular, became Henson's performing partner and comedic foil.
A legendary partnership.
Legendary. Henson credited both of them with developing much of the subsequent humor and character of the Muppets. Their performing partnership created iconic pairings that relied on their synergy. Henson's gentle, nervous characters contrasted perfectly with Oz's bombastic, assertive ones.
You see it with Bert and Ernie.
Exactly, exemplified by Bert and Ernie, and later, Kermit and Miss Piggy.
And this commercial period gave birth to one of the most controversial, yet hyper-effective advertising campaigns of its time, the Wilkins Coffee campaign.
Really?
The sources indicate that between 1957 and 1961, he produced an astonishing number, over 300 of these short, hyper-compressed 7-second spots for the local Wilkins Coffee Company in Washington, D.C.
The genius of the campaign was its shocking simplicity and humor. It featured two Muppets, Wilkins, who would praise the coffee enthusiastically, and Watkins, who would express hatred, reluctance, or indifference toward the product.
And Watkins' honest rejection was always met with immediate, dramatic, and often cartoonishly violent physical retaliation from Wilkins.
We're talking about Muppets being shot out of cannons, being flattened by hammers.
Smacked across the head with baseball bats, or bombarded with pies. It's a very aggressive, almost anarchic style of humor, completely at odds with the gentle nature of his later work.
Yet they were a massive hit. Henson later articulated their strategy. They recognized that most ad agencies were using a repetitive, didactic, hard sell model.
Right, treating the audience like they needed to be educated about product features.
Exactly. Henson moved away from that entirely. He succeeded by making the audience laugh first. He realized that a brief, surprising, and memorable moment of entertainment was more effective than a lengthy sales pitch.
And that success wasn't confined to coffee. That format was just instantly marketable.
It was. They were immediately remade for other regional companies across the country, selling everything from bakeries and beverages to oil companies. This decade of intense, high-volume, short-form production gave Henson and his team unparalleled experience in camera editing, comedic timing, and immediate audience engagement.
And it also funded their artistic experiments.
Right, and he had a few early network successes alongside the ads. Ralph the dog, the sophisticated piano-playing Muppet, became the first Muppet to make regular appearances on network television on The Jimmy Dean Show from 1963 to 1966.
And there is a remarkable anecdote connected to Jimmy Dean that illustrates the integrity of the people Henson chose to work with. Dean was so appreciative of the lift the Muppets gave his show's ratings that he offered Henson a substantial 40% interest in his production company.
Wow.
But Dean, demonstrating immense professional conscience, declined the offer, stating clearly that Henson deserved all the rewards for his own unique work. He never regretted that choice, even as Henson's company grew exponentially.
That speaks volumes about the collaborative spirit of the time. But even while he was busy selling products, Henson was always exploring broader artistic horizons. In 1965, he wrote and directed the 9-minute short film Timepiece.
Which is very different.
Very. An avant-garde, almost surrealistic experimental piece dealing with the relentless passage of time.
And that film garnered him genuine artistic recognition. He was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Live-Action Short Film.
Right, which clearly established that Henson was not just a clever puppeteer, but a thoughtful filmmaker with a strong experimental visual sensibility that extended far beyond felt and foam.
And this experimental streak would prove vital for his later fantasy films.
Absolutely. But the true game changer, the moment that fundamentally realigned his philosophical focus, came in 1969 with Sesame Street.
The big one.
The Children's Television Workshop, or CTW, under the leadership of Joan Gans Cooney, was looking to revolutionize early childhood education using television. They were immensely impressed by Henson's creativity, his ability to create immediate character appeal, and his technical mastery of the screen.
This was the pivotal moment, the ethical shift away from the profitable aggression of Wilkins Coffee. Henson and his team were brought on full-time for the new public television program. This collaboration resulted in the development of some of the most enduring, beloved, and iconic characters in television history.
He created Grover, Cookie Monster, Bert and Ernie, Oscar the Grouch, and eventually Big Bird was performed by Carol Spinney.
And Henson himself performed Ernie, often paired with Frank Oz as Bert, which just solidified their legendary performing partnership. He also performed Guy Smiley and frequently used Kermit the Frog as a roving news reporter.
The straight man reacting to all the chaos.
Exactly. But it's important to recall the initial creative friction, though. The Children's Television Workshop initially planned to keep the Muppets separate from the realistic segments featuring human actors. They were concerned the puppets would distract from the educational goals.
And that separation quickly dissolved. The CTW realized how profoundly effective and engaging the Muppets were as teaching tools. They were not merely entertainment, they were vital pedagogical instruments.
And this success was enormous for Henson, personally and professionally. He stated explicitly that the popularity and the consistent, mission-driven work of Sesame Street allowed him to finally achieve a long-held personal goal, stopping the production of commercials entirely.
That's the crucial bridge. He went from making hundreds of 7-second spots designed to sell coffee through slapstick violence to devoting himself fully to a nonprofit mission of teaching letters and numbers.
He said it was a pleasure to get out of that world. The educational and artistic mission had finally and fully eclipsed the need for the advertising hustle, and this philosophical alignment defined the next phase of his career.
Even after the enormous global triumph of Sesame Street, Henson faced a career challenge common to many highly successful artists, which was being typecast.
Right.
He worried that his company would be seen purely as purveyors of children's entertainment, preventing him from expanding his creative scope. Therefore, throughout the 1970s, he actively and purposefully sought out a major, dedicated adult audience.
His first significant attempt at cracking the adult market was the Land of Gort sketches, featured during the inaugural season of Saturday Night Live between 1975 and 1976. Henson admired Lorne Michaels' work and saw SNL as the perfect counter-programming to Sesame Street.
But the collaboration was deeply flawed. The sources detail significant friction. The SNL writers, who were generally young, hip, and writing sharp, cynical comedy, were notoriously uncomfortable writing for puppets.
He just didn't get it.
They often disparaged Henson's creations, viewing them as childish and beneath the avant-garde aesthetic they were trying to cultivate.
That infamous quote perfectly captures the attitude. Michael O'Donoghue, one of the original and most cynical SNL writers, stated bluntly, "I won't write for felt."
Ouch! It was a cultural clash between Henson's sincere, gentle brand of humor and the aggressive satire favored by the SNL team.
Henson eventually admitted that what he and his team were trying to do with Gorch and what the SNL writers could provide never gelled. They struggled with the logistics, the required time commitment, and the tone.
But that failure, however, was a critical redirection point. Instead of retreating, it forced him to rethink the format for his own dedicated adult vehicle, which led directly to his next global phenomenon.
Exactly. When Henson pitched his idea for a weekly Muppet variety series to American networks in 1976, they universally rejected it.
Still saw him as the kids guy.
Completely. They were still fixated on the idea that the Muppets only held appeal for kids, viewing him as a children's educator, not a comedy producer. So, Henson took a massive business risk and looked overseas.
He successfully pitched the show to the British impresario Lou Grade, the head of ATV, who provided the crucial financing. This led to The Muppet Show, a series that, due to Grade's involvement, was shot entirely in the UK at ATV Elstree Studios and then syndicated globally from 1976 to 1981.
And this business model, shooting overseas and selling the show directly to local stations worldwide, allowed him to bypass the control and constraints of American network programming entirely.
It was a revolutionary business move. It meant the content could be more experimental, tailored to a global adult sensibility, and less beholden to typical U.S. network time slots and production schedules. The resulting show was an international sensation that the American networks had completely underestimated.
And The Muppet Show was an absolute showcase of Henson's multifaceted talent. He served as producer, co-director, and performer of a staggering array of characters.
I mean, the list is incredible. Kermit, Ralph, Dr. Teeth, the cantankerous Waldorf.
Often paired with Frank Oz's Statler, yeah.
The often explosive Swedish chef, Link Hogthrob, and the newsman.
And his team offered a fascinating insight into his leadership style during this high-pressure period. They often compared his management approach to that of Kermit the Frog, a shy, gentle boss, almost hesitant to be assertive, but one with what they described as a whim of steel.
He was decisive and knew what he wanted, but always delivered feedback with kindness.
Carol Spinney, Big Bird's performer, shared anecdotes that highlighted this gentleness. If Henson genuinely disliked something, he wouldn't yell. He would simply go, and leave the performer to figure it out.
And if he liked it,
he would say, lovely. He saw Kermit as an essential alter ego, acknowledging that Kermit, as a character, can say things I hold back in real life. The chaos of the Muppet Theater needed Kermit's nervous leadership, just as the Jim Henson Company needed Henson's quiet determination.
The success of the television show naturally paved the way for the big screen. The Muppet movie in 1979 was a triumph, both critically and financially, grossing $65.2 million domestically.
And it was a deeply personal film for Henson, which he dedicated to his recently deceased idol, the radio ventriloquist Edgar Bergen.
And that film left an indelible mark on cultural history by introducing one of the most cherished songs of all time, Rainbow Connection, sung by Kermit. It managed to hit number 25 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart and was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song.
Following that success, Henson directed his next film, The Great Muppet Caper, in 1981. This marked a shift in his priorities, leading him to end The Muppet Show to prioritize feature filmmaking.
And we also find a fascinating and often overlooked collaboration during this era, the Yoda connection. In 1980, George Lucas was deep into the development of The Empire Strikes Back and needed to create a complex, highly expressive puppet for the character of Yoda.
So he went to the best.
He immediately sought out Henson's aid in creating and articulating the character. Lucas initially wanted Henson to take on the puppeteering role himself, but Henson, focused on his own projects, suggested his longtime performing partner, Frank Oz, for the job.
Oz took on the role of Yoda, performing him in the subsequent Star Wars films, a performance that Lucas felt was so integral that he unsuccessfully lobbied for Oz to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor.
It just highlights Henson's generosity and his recognition of his team's immense talents.
After the lightness and commercial appeal of the Muppet films, Henson's focus shifted in a dramatically different, more existential direction. In 1982, he founded the Jim Henson Foundation to promote the art of puppetry beyond his own commercial success.
And then he began creating these darker, complex fantasy films that explored what the sources describe as a growing, brooding interest in mortality.
This thematic shift is critical to understanding his later artistic life. He co-directed the complex fantasy epic The Dark Crystal in 1982 with Frank Oz. Henson moved away from the comedic, foam-based style and insisted on an unprecedented level of puppetry realism.
Right. They used the conceptual artwork of Brian Froud for the creatures, aiming for a visual world that was entirely puppet-driven, but that felt ancient and entirely real.
And the narrative of The Dark Crystal explicitly dealt with heavy themes. Duality, the struggle between good and evil, the fragmentation of the self, and the necessary reunification before death.
A profound departure from the meta-humor of The Muppet Show, and while it initially struggled financially in theaters, it was hailed critically and later gained a massive following and immense revenue on the emerging VHS home video market, solidifying its cult status.
He followed this up by directing Labyrinth in 1986, this time alone, starring David Bowie, and featuring his most elaborate creature work to date. It was a film visually steeped in fairy tale mythology, focusing on a young woman's journey of self-discovery through a menacing, magical world of puppets.
And artistically ambitious as it was, Labyrinth proved commercially disappointing upon its initial release, despite generally positive reviews. That failure reportedly affected Henson significantly.
His son, Brian Henson, noted that this commercial disappointment was the closest he ever saw his father get to being quite depressed. It was a critical blow for a man who seemed to relentlessly embody optimism and gentle humor.
And this commercial failure is worth dissecting. It launched in a crowded summer market, perhaps suffered from a confused marketing campaign. Was it a children's film or a dark fantasy? And struggled to find its audience quickly.
But just like The Dark Crystal.
Exactly. Labyrinth achieved definitive cult classic status in the ensuing decades through home video distribution. This pattern revealed a crucial aspect of Henson's later work. His artistic vision was often ahead of commercial acceptance, requiring time for audiences to catch up.
In the midst of all this commercial stress and artistic exploration, there's a smaller, poignant detail that reminds us of his influences. Henson traveled to Moscow in 1984. What was the purpose of that trip?
He went there specifically to film a documentary about Sergei Obraztsov. Obraztsov was a highly respected Soviet puppet master who had been a significant idol of Henson's since his teenage years, profoundly influencing him through Obraztsov's 1950 book, My Profession.
So he was honoring his roots.
Absolutely. During the trip, he donated 4 of his own dolls to the Moscow Museum of Obraztsov puppets, including a Fraggle and Robin the Frog. It just showed that despite his global fame, he never forgot the traditional artists who had inspired his own journey.
As the 1980s drew to a close, Jim Henson was managing a complicated portfolio. He continued the beloved children's work with successes like Fraggle Rock and the animated Muppet Babies, but he was also pushing to create sophisticated material for mature audiences.
He returned to television with projects like The Storyteller in 1988, which focused on classic folklore and utilized highly intricate creature work. It was successful, won an Emmy.
The following year, he attempted a more ambitious return to variety television with the Jim Henson Hour. The goal was to blend traditional Muppet humor with the complex, sometimes darker material he was interested in.
It was critically well received, and it won him an Emmy for outstanding directing in a variety or music program.
However, commercially, it was a profound disappointment. The show failed to capture a consistent audience and was canceled after just 12 episodes.
And Henson openly attributed the failure to the network, NBC, blaming their constant rescheduling of the program, which he argued prevented viewers from finding it.
That is Henson's perspective.
Yeah.
But the sources also suggest a potential counter-argument, which speaks to the challenge of that transitional period.
Sure. While rescheduling certainly hurts, the blended format mixing the surreal comedy of the Muppets with highly complex, sometimes heavy dramatic material might have simply been too dissonant or tonally confusing for a general primetime audience expecting a cohesive tone.
The public might have struggled with the abrupt shifts between light humor and deep thematic explorations in a single hour.
It's possible.
That commercial and artistic pressure seems to have been the primary catalyst for the single biggest business decision of his life, which began in late 1989. Henson entered into high-stakes negotiations to sell his company and his characters, though crucially excluding the Sesame Street Muppets.
Which were separately controlled by the Sesame Workshop.
Right, to sell them to the Walt Disney Company for almost $150 million.
His stated motivation was very clear. He was tired of the managerial burden. He hoped the massive sale would allow him to step away from the business structure and spend a lot more of my time on the creative side of things. He felt constrained by the relentless demands of being both the chief artist and the chief executive officer. It was intended to free him.
This was an immense negotiation, highly complex, spanning months, involving huge financial and creative stakes. And the sources contain the opinion of his longtime partner, Frank Oz, who suggested that the extreme stress of this Disney deal contributed significantly to Henson's death.
We must approach that statement carefully and objectively, understanding that this is a deeply felt emotional interpretation by a close colleague who witnessed the strain. While there is no substantive medical or psychological evidence to link chronic stress directly to the specific bacterial infection that took his life, constant high-stakes managerial pressure certainly compromises one's overall physical and mental reserves. Oz was speaking to the exhaustion and the intense vulnerability Henson must have felt trying to close a deal that was intended to redefine his entire future.
It's clear that Henson was looking forward to that new phase. He had already completed the television special The Muppets at Walt Disney World and was actively developing the Disney MGM Studios attraction Muppet Vision 3D. He was poised for a major transition. And then everything came to an immediate, tragic halt.
This section requires solemnity and objective reporting, reflecting the devastating swiftness of the event. Henson's final public television appearance was on the Arsenio Hall show on May 4, 1990.
In the days immediately following, he privately confided to his publicist that he felt unusually tired and was dealing with a sore throat. But he assumed, as many people do, that it was a minor, typical illness that would resolve itself naturally with rest.
He had to cancel a recording session due to his illness on May 14th.
The critical turning point and the point of immense tragedy occurred early in the morning of May 15th. He woke up with severe respiratory distress, struggling to breathe, and began coughing up blood.
Crucially, even at the severe stage, the sources note that he hesitated to go to the hospital. He had a lifetime habit of prioritizing his schedule and professional commitments, believing the illness would resolve itself without interrupting his plans.
This delay proved fatal. He was rushed to the emergency room at New York Presbyterian Hospital in Manhattan hours later when his condition became completely untenable. Tragically, very shortly after being admitted, he stopped breathing and was moved immediately to the intensive care unit.
X-rays revealed profound damage. Multiple abscesses were found in both of his lungs, resulting from a severe underlying streptococcal pharyngitis, a severe bacterial infection that had been quietly developing and overwhelming his system.
Despite aggressive treatment with multiple antibiotics and life support, the infection had already progressed to toxic shock syndrome, causing widespread organ dysfunction.
Jim Henson died the following morning, May 16, 1990, at the age of 53.
The initial cause of death reported was bacterial pneumonia, but it was later reclassified and understood clinically as organ dysfunction resulting from streptococcal toxic shock syndrome caused by the bacteria Streptococcus pyogenes.
The swiftness and severity of his passing shocked the world, and there was a painful, critical insight delivered by the medical team. David Gelmont, the hospital's intensive care unit director, stated clearly and tragically that Henson might have been saved had he sought medical treatment just a few hours sooner.
A few hours.
The infection was aggressive, but the crucial delay allowed it to cross the threshold into toxic shock.
Because his death was so sudden, and because the true nature of the bacterial infection was not immediately understood by the public, misinformation began to circulate. A false but distressingly widespread rumor began that Henson had died of AIDS.
This stemmed partly from the speed of the illness and the recent AIDS-related deaths of other well-known public figures.
That rumor was quickly and forcefully refuted by the intensive care unit director. The actual cause was a hyper-aggressive, rapidly developing bacterial infection that, due to the delay in seeking treatment because of his work ethic, became overwhelming and fatal. Following the tragedy, Henson's remains were cremated, and his ashes were later scattered near Taos, New Mexico in 1992.
The immediate aftermath of Henson's death was tumultuous for his company and family. The massive, complex Disney deal that had been the source of so much stress finally fell through a few months after his passing.
However, the Jim Henson Company and the Jim Henson Foundation continued their work, guided by his children. The Muppet and Bear and the Big Blue House properties were eventually sold to Disney in 2004, recognizing the long-term relationship.
But the rights to the Sesame Street characters, however, remained with the nonprofit Sesame Workshop, maintaining their educational missions separate from the commercial entertainment entity.
The succession of his most famous character, Kermit the Frog, was handled with immense care and respect. Steve Whitmire, who joined the core Muppet performing cast in 1978, took over the role 6 months after Henson's death, performing as Kermit for 2 decades until 2016. Matt Vogel succeeded him in 2017.
But the truly defining, unforgettable aspect of his passing was the public memorial service held in Manhattan on May 21, 1990. Henson, true to his spirit, had one very specific instruction for the service: that absolutely no one wear black.
He wanted a celebration, not a somber viewing.
And the service became an immense, vibrant celebration of color and imagination, reflecting the joy he brought the world. It was filled with deeply symbolic elements. Harry Belafonte sang his beloved song, Turn the World Around, which he had famously performed on The Muppet Show.
And as he sang, every attendee, numbering in the thousands, waved brightly colored foam butterflies attached to puppet rods, transforming the cathedral into a swirling garden of color.
But perhaps the emotional core of the entire memorial was the performance of Carol Spinney. Performing as Big Bird, Spinney walked onto the stage in a moment that captured the immense personal and artistic loss felt by his colleagues.
Big Bird sang Kermit's signature, reflective song, Being Green, a poignant choice given that Kermit, the performer, was gone, but his character was singing about identity and self-acceptance.
And Spinney was visibly struggling throughout the performance, fighting back tears while singing the song in character. It was a raw, heartbreaking moment that captured the duality of their creative world, the ability to hide emotion behind a puppet, yet allowing the grief to shine through.
The funeral was concluded by the lively, spirited sound of the Dirty Dozen brass band playing When the Saints Go Marching In, transforming the solemn occasion into a joyous New Orleans-style send-off. Life magazine described the event as an epic and almost unbearably moving event.
It was the perfect, vibrant farewell for the man who brought so much vibrancy to life.
Henson has received extensive posthumous recognition, cementing his status as a cultural giant. He was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1991. Notably, he is one of only 4 people to be honored both as himself and as one of his characters, Kermit the Frog.
Recognizing the fundamental interconnectedness of the artist and his creation.
He was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame in 1987 and was named the Disney Legend in 2011. His alma mater, the University of Maryland College Park, commissioned a life-size statue of Henson sitting next to Kermit the Frog, installed outside the Student Union in 2003.
Paid for by 3 separate graduating classes in recognition of his enduring influence.
And we cannot overlook the cultural longevity of his music. In 2020, Rainbow Connection was selected for preservation in the National Recording Registry for being deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
His legacy endures, not only through reruns and new films, but also through the highest cultural and artistic honors, ensuring his technical innovations and artistic mission will continue to influence new generations. The creation of documentaries like 2024's Jim Henson Idea Man also speaks to the ongoing fascination with his life and methods.
So as we synthesize this monumental career, what we ultimately see is a genius who masterfully combined technical innovation, the soft foam materials, the dynamic camera techniques, the logistical triumph of global syndication with timeless humor and an unwavering artistic drive.
He fundamentally and permanently changed both children's educational media and adult entertainment.
And the painful irony remains the stark contrast between the vibrant, flexible, imaginative worlds he spent his life constructing, and the swift, unforgiving end brought by a hyper-aggressive bacterial infection.
He was a creator who tirelessly valued control over his output and schedule, but was ultimately taken by a natural force entirely beyond his control, simply because he was tragically a few hours late in recognizing the severity of the threat.
This exploration reveals a career defined by finding a higher purpose. What stands out to you most about that massive philosophical shift Henson made? The moment he transitioned from focusing on the highly profitable short-form advertising, where he had achieved major aggressive success selling products, to suddenly devoting himself entirely to the fundamental educational and artistic mission of Sesame Street. That decision, to value mission over maximizing profit, truly defines his legacy.
It absolutely does, transforming a businessman into a revolutionary artist.
Thanks for listening.